Hello and welcome to What Are the Odds? In today's video, we will discuss the likelihood that the events are to be repeated in Back to the Future. The film follows Marty McFly and Dr. Emmett Brown. Marty makes plans with his girlfriend but comes home to find the car has been totaled by Biff, his dad's supervisor. Over dinner, we find out how his parents, George and Lorraine, met. Her grandpa hit George with a car, and Lorraine felt bad, and they ended up going to the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. Marty goes to meet Doc at Twin Pines Mall at 1:16 a.m. In an experiment, Doc sends Einstein, his dog, off in the DeLorean. In a shootout with the Libyans, Doc is shot. Marty heads into the DeLorean and travels back to 1955. We'll take this to be the film's inciting incident. Event number 1, Marty goes to 1955. Factors include the date that was entered. Upon his arrival, he crashes into a barn. The family there is spooked when Marty crawls out in a radiation hazard suit and believes him to be an alien. Marty leaves Twin Pines Ranch after he realizes he's really traveled back in time. He hides the DeLorean behind a sign and wanders into town. He calls Doc from a cafe and orders something without sugar beside his dad, George. Biff enters calling for McFly, and they both turn. Biff and McFly, George that is, run a routine that's essentially the same 30 years in the future. Marty finds out Biff has been bullying and abusing George all this time. Marty finds George peeping through a window and saves him in front of a car, after getting hit by a car himself. Marty wakes almost 9 hours after with Lorraine. Marty gets directions to Riverside Drive and leaves. He meets Doc and they go to the DeLorean. Event number 2, they make a plan to harness the lightning strike to serve as the power source for the required 1.21 gigawatts for the flux capacitor. Factors include the flyer. They go to the school and Marty tries to introduce George to Lorraine. It fails when Lorraine is captivated by Marty instead. He follows George around. When his words don't convince him, Marty gets the idea to pretend to be Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan and spook him into asking Lorraine out. In the cafe, George tries his luck, but Biff enters. Doc's plan consists of running industrial-strength electrical cable down from the clock tower to between two lampposts. The DeLorean will be outfitted with a pole and a big hook that is connected to the flux capacitor. Right at 10:04 p.m. Saturday night, lightning will strike the cable right as the hook makes contact, sending the 1.21 gigawatts into the flux capacitor. Lorraine asks Marty to the dance. Marty tells George his new plan. He's going to get Lorraine upset with him when George is going to come to her rescue. While Doc sets up his plan, Biff confronts Marty and takes his place in the car with Lorraine. Marty gets locked in the trunk of another car with keys inside. George punches the lights out of Biff. Marty, once unlocked, takes the place of Marvin in the band, whose hand got busted up, getting Marty out of the trunk. Event number 3, after the dance, Marty goes to meet Doc and they enact their plan. A tree falls and breaks the cable's connection. Doc goes to fix it and Marty successfully travels back to an alternate future. This film's final event is that Marty goes back to 1985 intact. Factors include Marty's original travel destination, Marty finding Doc and making a plan, Marty and Doc's execution of that plan. As for the reasons for Marty to go back to 1985, the only vital events are those that involve his and Doc's plan. If Marty never interferes with George and Lorraine's meeting, his getting back to 1985 would have been easier. We'll also have to ignore the fact that his being there changes the future and he's actually going back to an alternate 1985, one that is different from his own. It's time to calculate the odds. For the initial travel, we're only determining the successful travel back in time to be 1955. Any earlier and Marty may not have been able to get Doc's help any later, and a lightning strike wouldn't have occurred in a predictable manner. Therefore, will approximate 1955 to be the general window, and they could have picked a year ranging from 0 to 1985. Their choosing of the year was mostly based off of relevant events that occurred during that year. Still, they weren't picking a year based on where they wanted to go at that moment, and it certainly could have turned hypothetical. Therefore, I'll treat each year as having an equal chance at being the last year they chose to hypothetically have their first venture. The odds become 1 in 1985. The plan relied heavily on knowing the relevant details of the lightning strike. Due to that, this would be a matter of how likely it was that Marty received a flyer and brought it along to 1955. He kept it merely because his girlfriend Jennifer wrote her number on it. The factors include receiving the flyer, the timing, Jennifer leaving her number, and taking the flyer along. The woman handing out the flyer will be a 1 in 2. Had she given it to Marty after Jennifer left, Marty wouldn't have had reason to keep the flyer. This factor, however, is dependent on the one prior. Marty and Jennifer made plans, and Jennifer left him her number for him to be able to call her. For this, will determine how likely it was for her to write it on the flyer itself. Another 1 in 2. As for taking the flyer, Marty took it along when he didn't need to, so this will be another 1 in 2. For the total, 1 in 2 to the third power to get 1 in 8. For the execution of the plan, we'll determine the odds of Doc successfully reconnecting the cable. As we saw in the film, Doc had enough time to reconnect the cable. However, he was at risk of falling, and it's reasonable to apply a 1 in 2 for whether or not he falls. Multiplying the odds, we get 1 in 1985 times 1 in 8 times 1 in 2 to get 1 in 31,760. Well, now we know, if you were to travel to a random split with the exact same necessary initial conditions, the likelihood that you'd see these same events transpire and the successful outcome of the final event is 0.00315%.